Bonjour et bienvenue à tous de Chicago. My name is Aimée Laberge and I'm the Director of Program at the Alliance Française de Chicago. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the making of the Museum of Decorative Arts with Sophie Motsch, part of the Making of the Great Museum of Paris series with Russell Kelly. If you are not familiar with the Zoom webinar format, please check a few useful instructions on our chat line. Please also note that we will be sending you a recording of this talk in the next few days. This program is presented in partnership with the Alliance Française de Métro Miami, with communication support from the American Friends of Le Louvre, the American Friends of Versailles, the Friends of Domaine de Chantilly, the French Heritage Society, and the Federation of Alliance Française USA. This is the last talk in the Great Museum of Paris series, and we would like to take this opportunity to thank a few people. First, a very special thank you to Russell, bien sûr, for devising those series, bringing so much to our winter months here in Chicago, as well as his dedication to Paris, its architecture, its culture, and for his generosity in sharing this passion with us. We would also like to thank the team making this series possible. At the Alliance Française de Miami Métro, a thank you to Patricia Bona, Présidente, Stanislas René, Executive Director, and Elisabeth de Gouzel. At the Alliance Française de Chicago, to Mary Ellen Connellan, our Executive Director, Rick Shepro, the President of our board, as well as the essential technical support provided by Mao Bourtambour and Léa Martinez. Now, a few words about Russell. Russell Kelly is the curator and moderator of the past 3 winters lecture series on the Grand Château of the Loire and Île-de-France, the making of the French gardens, and the great churches of Paris. He has lived in Paris for 30 years and is the author of The Making of Paris, the story of how Paris evolved from a fishing village into the world's most beautiful city, Globe Picot Presse 2021. And now to you, Russell.
Thank you, Aimée. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Sophie Motsch joined the Museum of Decorative Arts in 1998 as an associate curator in Western Decorative Arts of the 17th and 18th centuries. One of her first duties was to participate in the reinstallation of the 17th and 18th century display galleries for the grand reopening of the Museum of Decorative Arts in 2006, after 10 years of renovation works. A specialist in the history of collecting, Sophie has a bachelor's degree in English and Italian and in art history from the Paris 10 University and a master's degree in art history from the Université Jules Verne in Amiens. Sophie lectures and teaches regularly at the Musée des Arts Décoratifs and at its neighbor, the École du Louvre, among other institutions, and she sits on the advisory board of the Society of the History of French Art. So, as you can see, Sophie is eminently qualified to tell us the story of the making of the Museum of Decorative Arts. À vous, Sophie.
Thank you, Russell. Here is the presentation. So, can you see my screen? Can you see everything?
Perfect.
Okay. So, hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here to talk about Musée des Arts Décoratifs, which I know well, as Russell said, because I'm working in for ages now. Actually, Musée des Arts Décoratifs is a tiny, tiny part of the Louvre. Here you see the whole building of the Grand Louvre, and the Musée des Arts Décoratifs is installed in the Marsan wing. That's the northern wing facing the gardens towards the building here. That's the Rue de Rivoli. So it's really tiny in comparison with the Louvre. Actually, Musée des Arts Décoratifs has been installed in here, especially here plus there, from 1905. But the story, as for the story of the creation of Musée des Arts Décoratifs, we have to go back to the 19th century, especially the mid-19th century, when Industrial Revolution was extremely harsh especially the competition between countries, between France and England, for instance. Here is a representation of the first Universal exhibition in London at the Crystal Palace. You can see the little stands presenting manufacturing goods such as tapestries, sculptures, silversmiths, goldsmiths, everything was presented, and all what you can see there was the very best of these manufacturers. And these men in France were a little bit worried about the competition with England and the fact that England was at its best at that time. And they were a little bit afraid of what was to be the modern era and what was going to be the future of France's craftsmanship. And craftsmen gathered to create a kind of non-profit association. In this slide, you can see 4 personalities. Jules Massier was actually a very rich man who studied law, but he never actually was in the legal business. He was a collector. He was passionately inspired by art. He studies thoroughly every field, and he decided to create a kind of library, a kind of imaginary library with a collection of 5,000 iconographic albums where he glued, he pasted images according to themes. And these albums, you can still look at them in the library of Musée des Arts Décoratifs. So he was one of the main benefactors and donors, just like a kind of pilgrim fathers, the equivalent of the pilgrim fathers. He was a kind of initial donors and benefactors. Henri Bouillet here was a partner, a relative of Christophe. Christophe is a 19th century silversmith, very famous, that still exists. And he was also worried about the fact that Industrial Revolution was changing things about creation. Henri Weber was in the jewelry business. He was a creator, he was a painter, a sculptor, and a theoretician too for jewelry. He was much inspired. He was a little bit the equivalent of Lalique as for the style of his jewelry. And then Raymond Coquelin was a journalist, most interested in Asian arts, but also in the life of museums. He was a co-founder of the Society of the Friends of the Louvre, for instance, and he decided, together with these other men and others, to create in 1882 l'Union Centrale des Arts Décoratifs. So that was a kind of a non-profit organization to protect craftsmen and to develop the beginning of a museum. The era of that was the Universal exhibition. And at the very first, the museum didn't exist where it was, Rue de Rivoli. It was just a little stand right here. This is the Universal exhibition in 1900. Maybe you remember that the Eiffel Tower dates back 1889, so another previous Universal exhibition. This is Grand Palais, that still exists, Petit Palais here. And all around here is the axis towards Les Invalides. And this area was built with metallic structures. And in here you had a department store, I mean, a presentation of what department store could offer. And you had Les Arts Décoratifs. And in here, you have, you can see here the installation. So that's the Eiffel Tower, the Invalides here, and Arts Décoratifs was here in a kind of pavilion. And this pavilion was decorated by an artist, George Henschel, who was also a collector and a sculptor. And that's the Pavillon du Bois, which is like the wooden pavilion. A gorgeous expression of wooden sculpture, typical of 1900. As for the style, you see, it's just like Gallet or Guimard. You know, Guimard, that's the artist of the ancient entrance of the metro in Paris. I'm sure you know about it. So this Pavillon du Bois was installed in here. And after that, the necessity of finding a permanent place was obvious, and they take into account that this pavilion, which was at the very end of the Louvre, and this is the Louvre Pavillon de Flore facing the Seine, and that's the other one opposite. It actually went on a fire because maybe you know about the Tuileries. Tuileries was between these two pavilions. That was one of the chateaux of the King of France. And in 1870, Parisians put it on a fire, and there was a massive destruction. So after the rebuilding of the Pavillon de Marsan here, they decided to install Musée des Arts Décoratifs. Here it is, huh? That's the Pavillon de Marsan, and the whole building here is the Musée des Arts Décoratifs. Very first, of course, the installation of the bibliothèque, so the library, what it was, with the people very elegantly dressed, and all over the building, inside the shelves, on the shelves, you see albums. That's the 5,000 albums created by Jules Massier, the man we saw on the previous slide. Here he is. So that's the thematical albums. Ranging from, it's 5,000. Can you imagine that? All over. Some of them are digitalized. You can see and browse through them online. And it's a various array, from drawings for embroidery to cutlery, but also gardening, for instance, or sculpture and so on and so forth. So that's the very first step of it, 1905. And after that, they gathered other friends, antique dealers, and other donors, and they installed chronological galleries. They wanted craftsmen to be able to have a very wide range of art to get inspired. So it was chronological from Middle Age to the present days. At that time, present days was what was on in 1905. So that's Art Nouveau. Here is Louis XV's gallery. Every kind of art is represented. You know, decorative art is to be opposed to Beaux-Arts. So that's everything but painting and sculptures. Of course, there are also some paintings to illustrate decorative arts. Here is a series of boiseries coming from Place Vendôme, cities, armchairs, chairs, bust sculptures, marble sculptures, French porcelain in the showcases here, a gorgeous tapestry, stupendous frame, a gilded frame here, and so on and so forth. That's another view. It's a publication. You see, it said Musée des Arts Décoratifs, PL for planche. That's illustration in a portfolio, like a guidebook. Another presentation here. That's 19th century presentation. So what's going on in 1880s? And what is very interesting on this slide is you can see the vast array, vast range of art, because you have furniture in the middle, and here a little showcase is presenting objects. You have drawings, and you know drawings are fragile with the light, so at that time they were installed like that. Another set of showcases. You have a painting illustrating a universal exhibition. You have a major wallpaper here. You have fabric on the wall. I mean, modern fabric, but it was a cool atmosphere and very decorative, like upholstery art at that time. And of course, from 1905 to the 60s, things changed, evolution, mentality, and everything. So you see here what was the proposition of Serge Royot. Serge Royot was one of the best decorator ever. Even the magazine Architectural Digest wrote an article about him and his talented skills, saying that it was one of the 10 best decorators ever. And you see the enormous place for fabrics, upholstery, etc. The wall is covered with toile here, even the tablecloth. You have a little wallpaper folding screen. You have a nice chandelier here, a bed with all the cover and the drapes and so on and so forth for 19th century and Art Nouveau, etc. Of course, 1960s progressively became out of date. And that's the reason why the museum closed in 1996. They wanted to have a major, it was necessary to have a major renovation as for the electricity, central heating, the climate control, and so on and so forth. This radical change took a very long time. As Russell said, it's a 10 days closure. It's enormous. And the reason why there were so many changes with the director, the president, so everyone wanted to have its own idea of a new museum. By the way, in 2006, the reopening was on. It was 15th of September, 2006. And one of the particularity of Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris is that it's the only one in France which has such a large period of time, because it's from the Middle Age, I mean the collection, to nowadays. But in 2006, of course, nowadays is 100 years more than when it opened initially in 1905. So you have to put these things together and you have to be able to arrange them. And the trouble is the museum cannot extend because it's over. I mean, the structure is the Louvre. You can have an extension of it. So it was really tricky. Anyway, here is Middle Age. You see, it's a very nice presentation since it just looks like a nave in a church with the main altar here and several works like several altars here, sculptures, tapestries, wood panels, and so on and so forth. A gorgeous little 15th century bedroom. Of course, curtains are brand new, but you have the atmosphere room, which was really something much appreciated for ages and still is, because that's the presentation which still on view. That's very important to focus on that, because since the status of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs is absolutely unique in France, because it is a non-profit organization dealing with national collection. It's very complicated, very unique. And the trouble is, it is very restrictive because actually there is practically no budget for buying things, for acquisitions, nor restoration. As for the conservation purpose, it's only based on the generosity of sponsors, individual sponsors or company, and so on and so forth. So sponsorship is very important. And this room, it's a cabinet d'amateur, so it's the connoisseurs gallery. It's about to change every other, like 5 years, it depends. It's a tribute here to a donor, the man, the individual who gave these clocks. It's like 33 clocks. It's extremely generous, and it's been installed here since 2014, and we will probably change it quite soon. It's extremely generous because it's also a sign for other people to encourage gifts, you know. So this is one of the rooms in the 18th century gallery. This is the Rocaille gallery. Actually, in America and in a lot of countries, people would rather say Rococo. And Rococo is the period of Louis XV. It's a curved objects. You see everything is curved. Here is a portrait of Louis the 15th. It's an earthenware portrait. It's a faience. So we have, of course, a presentation in a room behind a kind of little robes here, and also showcases. Another showcase mastering the art of Sèvres porcelain. The presentation is brand new. It's hardly 1 year old. The color of it has been, I mean, the color in the production is the motto of, I mean, it's the idea we have to present that. I mean, it's both color and inspiration, and also a little chronological, because here it's younger, it's nearly 19th century, and over there it's early 18th century, the very beginning of the manufacture in Sèvres. Very nice reconstitution. That's a drawing room of a mansion, a Parisian residence which used to be in the Place Vendôme. Everything comes from Place Vendôme. In 19th century, the same kind of things for Renaissance revival style. It was the little persons over there in costumes. That's a representation of the ballet Sylphide, maybe the classical ballet. Another interesting room is the dining room by Eugène Grasset. Eugène Grasset is an extraordinary artist who was actually a painter, a draftsman, a sculptor, working in several fields such as advertisement, jewelry, furniture. He created these typical sculptured dining room for the late 19th century. Here is very near to the 20th century, a fireplace in earthenware, that's grès, as well as these works here. A dining room by Gallet or Guimard, very nicely set with nice colors. This is actually not from 2006. Every now and then you have a little renovation depending to the acquisition or the idea of the curators, because from 2006 and now curators have changed progressively, and practically no curator are still here from 2006. Jeanne Lanvin apartments, typical of 1920. Jeanne Lanvin, the fashion designer who had a very trendy apartment in Paris, in the Rive Gauche, a gorgeous bathroom with a lot of works, and a nice bedroom and boudoir. And of course, 20th century is represented, and here is an image of a presentation of series, armchairs and new materials, plastic, and so on and so forth. Actually, Musée des Arts Décoratifs is not only a museum of furniture, porcelain, silver, etc., because it's 1.5 million works, which is enormous. 13 curators, about 400 employees, about 12 associate curators. In 2022, 7 exhibitions took place in the museums. Approximately 1 million visitors came and see these things. And fashion and textile, for instance, as you know, is fragile usually, and it needs a lot of work to present them on the mannequin. So they are presented on temporary exhibitions or temporary display. But the collection is extraordinary. It's several 10,000 objects, like 100,000 objects, either fashion or textiles or shoes, accessories, handbags, umbrellas, and so on and so forth, from practically the antique, but it's only tiny pieces of textiles, and most of the clothes, the ancient ones, are from the Renaissance. The main collection is 18th century and, of course, a little bit 19th century and 20th century. These slippers, for instance, they belong to Josephine, Napoleon's wife, and so on and so forth. And of course, because the collection is well known, a lot of loans are on every year. For instance, in 2022, 927 items were on loan for temporary exhibitions around the world. So it's France and abroad. It's a lot of work, but it's also a fantastic way for people to get to know the collections. As for jewelry too, actually, the collection of jewelry in Musée des Arts Décoratifs is rich of 6,000 items. Among them, 1,200 are on permanent presentation in the very entrance of the museum on the first floor, where the fashion and textile galleries are. The jewelry are from, just like the other items of the museums, from 15th century to nowadays. Very modern creation like that. That's 1990. This is a necklace, you see, very elegant and delicate. This is partly antique, cameo, and 19th century reconstruction in gold. This is Middle Age, the Baroque pearl, which is with its particular shape, a sheep, the holy sheep, and so on and so forth. That's à nouveau, of course, Lalique, gorgeous pendant. Wallpaper, drawings, and photographs too. It's a wide collection because, again, from 15th century to 21st century, 400,000 wallpapers, 200,000 drawings, 350,000 photographs. The variety is great too, because you have like drawings from interior decorators. That's very interesting. You see Maison de l'Iran, that was the bedroom of the ambassador, typical of 1968. It's watercolor and pencil. You have ancient wallpaper, but also regular gifts of the manufacturers. Of course, that's very important for some fields like advertisement or wallpaper, to receive every year a lot of gifts by the manufacturers. And also photographs. This is a typical representation of Paris at the very end of the 19th century. It's fantastic to get to know Paris at that time when modernism was not yet everywhere. I forgot to mention advertisement, which is another section of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs. Also mainly in storage, because there is no galleries dedicated to advertisement, but my colleague, they regularly installed things in relation with advertisements, such as poster, for instance, or commercial documents within the permanent galleries. But since it's fragile, just like paper, wallpaper, or photographs, it's only for a limited period of time. It's usually 6 months to 1 year maximum, just as for the costume. Musée des Arts Décoratifs also have a fantastic collection, a little bit well known, but progressively it's gonna be really well known, on Asian art. I forgot to put some slides, I'm sorry. It's about 20,000 works of art from Japan, China, India, and so on and so forth. And just for the other fields I mentioned, these things are on display in the galleries according to the interest of them, according to the style, the period, or the fact that it can be compared to other art, because of course the influence of Asia on Western art is obvious, and sometimes even reverse, because the VOC you know, the exchanges of cultural things is very important. The Musée des Arts Décoratifs is also very lucky to have conservation studios permanently installed in the main building. We have a wood conservator, metal conservator, textile conservator, and paper conservator. And it's extremely precious to have these people working here because, for instance, when you have an acquisition such as this gorgeous male doublet, I'm not sure about the pronunciation, that's a juste au corps, in leather, you see the period, it's extremely ancient. Of course, it's fragile, you get to take real care about it. And a conservation box has been made on purpose. You see the line, the figure of it, to keep it safe in the storage, to keep it flat in order not to have it torn the wrong way. So this is an acquisition which is immediately took care of, and it's been installed, of course, in the Middle Age gallery, and it was a success because it's quite rare to have a presentation of such an old piece of clothes, a masculine piece of clothes. This is one of the latest acquisition. It's a tureen and stand in porcelain. For those who are familiar with porcelain, it's an extremely interesting piece because it's a 1990 piece by Cindy Sherman. Of course, you know Cindy Sherman. She's rather interested in photographic art, in having herself in disguise and she's the center of her heart. And in here, she pays a tribute to Madame de Pompadour. She's here wearing a costume just like Madame de Pompadour in the 18th century. And Madame de Pompadour was quite a personality because she was not only the lover of Louis XV, but she was the benefactors of the manufacture of Sèvres porcelain. And we all know that it is such an important manufacturer that still exists and still produce for especially for private orders by courts, especially in the Arabic, but not only in the Arabics. And the skill of the craftsman is still extraordinary. And we were very happy with my colleague of the 20th century in contemporary art to get to present it amidst the porcelain de Sèvres 18th century showcase, because it's important, this confrontation. And of course, this is something we were able to acquire because of the generosity of a donor. And this donor, he said he wanted to offer this terrain to Musée des Arts Décoratifs on purpose because he knew Musée des Arts Décoratifs has an extraordinary ceramic collection. As for 18th century, for instance, it's approximately 900 pieces in Sèvres and approximately more than 1,000 pieces in German porcelain plus others. So it's a very important field of interest for Musée des Arts Décoratifs. I mentioned permanent presentation, but of course, in this structure of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, which is unique, the nave, we call it the nave because, again, it looks like a church or an elegant and ancient building, though it's 1905, the construction of it. This place, you see, it has practically not changed for more than 1 century. Here is the pictures of the opening. You see stands for people to sit and relax, and all the galleries, the permanent galleries, were all over the nave here, and still is now. When you enter the museum this way, you go up. Here you have the Middle Age and Renaissance. Afterwards, you go all the way here from 17th century to 18th century. 3rd floor, 4th floor, And then behind here, you have 19th century here. And right here where I am, here, it's the rest as for the chronology. So that's Art Nouveau, Art Deco, and 21st century. But in the nave, it's mainly temporary exhibitions, of course. Alors, I must focus on the building again. Because of the Olympics, you know that Paris is undergoing major scaffoldings, transformation of the streets, and so on and so forth. So there is a huge program of renovation for the facade. So the facade and the main entrance, which used to be here, right here, is totally covered by this canvas that was made by an artist, Mathieu Cosset. And the visitors, they go all the way to the garden, so it's here, and they enter through the garden right here. They can also enjoy in summer a nice restaurant. So that's the entrance. So if you want to visit either the permanent galleries all over or the temporary exhibitions, you enter through here, at least till autumn. What is going on now? Alors, the nave actually is a place where all the curators, all the colleagues want to have their exhibitions because it's spectacular. It's like 60 meters high, approximately 1,000 square meter. So it's extremely large and you can have nice presentation. This one, Mode et Sport, d'un podium à l'autre, it's fashion and sports from one podium to another. It's a very clever exhibition because it's a reflection on the links between fashion and sports from the antiquity. You see vases here to the present days. And of course, here you have a poster of the previous Parisian Olympics, which was 100 years ago, Paris, 1924. So very nice presentation because of the 50 meters high, you have like the Olympic rings here, changing colors. It's a very nice presentation. You see it goes to April. The 7th, the poster is gorgeous with a made to measure dress by Lacoste, and the nave has been transformed into a stadium, and I think this is very nice an idea with all these little sports people here. Another exhibition did open recently on fashion. It's a tribute to a very young fashion designer. She's hardly 35 years old. She's Iris van Herpen. She's wearing her own creation here, a blue dress. She's from the Netherlands. She's actually here welcoming Queen Maxima of the Netherlands and Brigitte Macron, the president of France's wife, for the opening of this exhibition. It's extremely weird. You see the inspiration is sometimes from the sea, from the micro elements, etc., etc. It's an extremely successful exhibition, and of course, since it's successful, Musée des Arts Décoratifs has its own department on international. So this is the first venue of the exhibition, and there will be 3 or 4 other venues, for instance, in Australia, among other countries. Should you come in Paris, you can visit it till April the 28th. And what is going on in spring? Very soon we'll have Henry Cross exhibition. It's a not very famous till now sculpture and draftsman on glasswork. This is actually glass, though it doesn't look like glass, it's not transparent. He was really innovative in the way he was creating vases and sculpture. Another exhibition which is going to be great on the creation of Parisian department stores from 1852 to 1925. Here is an image of a former department store that doesn't exist anymore. Of course, you know some of them, Galerie Lafayette, Bon Marché, Printemps. They will be represented in the exhibition with elements. In autumn, you'll have an exhibition on intimacy. So that's one of Degas drawings. So that this is not a work from Musée des Arts Décoratifs, but of course, you'll have many others. Christophe, you remember Henri Bouillet, who was one of the founders of Musée des Arts Décoratifs. So Christophe, the silversmith, still exists, and there will be a major exhibition, which also is considered a kind of retrospective. And I choose this very fun element because it's really the kind of cup you got at Starbucks. The difference is it's silver. And for Christmas, the ideal exhibition for a large public during Christmas holidays and family with children and young visitors, My Teddy Bear, the history of the teddy bear. A tribute to the main donors is paid permanently, since one of the staircases going from the ground floor to the second floor is decorated with portraits of donors from the very beginning, the people we saw in 1882 to nowadays. For example, you have here Michel Schulman, who died recently, and other people, and regularly you have portraits of the main donors, which are hung in this staircase. It's a very nice way to pay a tribute to this very, very important person. What is interesting too is that Musée des Arts Décoratifs is not only Musée des Arts Décoratifs Rue de Rivoli, but it's also Musénissime de Camondo. I'm sure some of you ever visited it or heard of it, but maybe you didn't know it's part of the same institution. You may not know that, partly because it's not at all located in the site. Musée des Arts Décoratifs is right here, you know, le Louvre, and Musée des Arts Décoratifs is right here in the corner. And Parc Monceau is right here. It's near Arc de Triomphe. So Musénissime de Camondo is Rue de Monceau, right here. It's a residence of this man, Moïse de Camondo, who decided he used to live here. He was passionately collecting 18th century furniture and works of art of every kind. And since he had the sorrow, immense sorrow of losing his only son, he also had a daughter, Nissim, during World War I in 1917, he decided to have his residence transformed into a museum when he died. That's the reason why in 1935, the museum was opened just after he died. Actually, this museum, you see the facade, maybe I show you before that slide, it's mimicking Petit Trianon, but it's a 1911, 1914 building. It's amazing. It's due to René Sergent, who was an architect specialized in Gabriel. Gabriel is the architect of Place de la Concorde and architect of Petit Trianon. So it's pretty obvious, this inspiration. Moïse de Camondo told him to do something in order to host his collection, and the result is gorgeous. Here is the Grand Salon for the opening very early in 1936. Actually, Moïse de Camondo died in the winter of 1935. You see how it didn't change. Practically nothing has changed, apart from having the carpet a little bit pushed over there, not to walk during the visit. These armchairs are a little bit more in the center of the carpet. So visitors are walking all the way like that. And most of the time, they don't realize they are in a museum. They think they are at Friends. So it's a gorgeous place with more than 5,000 works of art, because everything is a work of art from the 18th century. The bequest of Maurice de Camondo is very spectacular and very special because he didn't want to have the collection enriched after his death, and he didn't want the pieces to be on loan. So it's a permanent collection that will never move, never changes. So no chance you can see any of these pieces in a permanent exhibition anywhere in the world. Should you come here, you will see the same thing you saw 20 years ago or 5 years ago. Here is the Huet drawing room. Huet is the name of the painter, lovely pastoral shepherd love affair here, and very nice pieces of furniture. Some of them are very, very precious because this was a carpet that belonged to the King of France. Here you used to have the fleur-de-lis. They were removed during the Revolution, hence the kind of pieces like that, torn and used. What is very unique about Camondo is that you visit a residence in Paris, inner Paris, and you see the kitchen, the pantry, the bathroom. So not only the master's bedroom, the gorgeous drawing room and so on and so forth, but the servants' quarter. The kitchen, the pantry has been preserved, and it's absolutely fantastic. And since the Siri Downton Abbey has been on view, of course, people are referencing to it because it's exactly the impression you have when you enter. The servants' dining room is regularly set. You see the table is set here for Christmas with fake orange. It's wax. Nuts are real, though. And holly, and you got the tablecloth, and so on and so forth. And everything has been preserved. As for the dining room upstairs, you have a gorgeous set of plates by Sèvres. It's Buffon with the drawing of the birds. And then, as I told you several times during this presentation, you can rent all these places plus others for private events, because without sponsorship, without members and patrons who host private events, business meetings, fashion show, dinner party, cocktail party, the Musée des Arts Décoratifs wouldn't be able to exist. And of course, you can also rent some places like the hall, the kitchen, or the garden at Musée de Camondo to host private events or commercial events. For instance, on the right in the garden, it's a champagne event organized by one of the Maisons de Champagne. And on the left, it's a presentation for a promotion film for a wedding planner. So from 3 months now, practically, you can organize a wedding party in Camondo, which is, of course, extremely elegant. So you see how diverse the collections of Musée des Arts Décoratifs is, plus Musée de Camondo, which is also part of it. I didn't mention other aspects such as academics, like Maurice de Camondo, when he died in 1935, gave a huge amount of money in order to create a designer's school that still exists. It's École Camondo, Boulevard Raspail, near Montparnasse on the left bank. Well, this amount of money didn't exist anymore, but it was thanks to that this school was created. And you also have regular education programs for visitors, and also workshop for people, children or adults, who want to learn to write comics, to draw comics, or plaster, like terracotta molding, and so on and so forth. So Musée des Arts Décoratifs is a huge institution with approximately 400 people, and it's not only Musée and Musée de Camondo, but also the school for younger future designers, and that's it. I hope you would like to visit both Musée des Arts Décoratifs and Musée de Camondo very soon, because what is about to be on view is very interesting and original. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sophie, for that excellent presentation with truly beautiful photographs. And you really showed us the extraordinary variety of the permanent collection at the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, as well as the many, many exciting exhibitions that are coming up. You can stop sharing your screen now.
Okay.
It's a remarkable variety in the permanent exhibition. I've been there to the museum several times, but it's not, you keep referring to it as a little tiny piece of the Louvre, but it's actually quite, it's 9 floors, I think you mentioned at one time. So there's a lot of different galleries tucked away in there. So you can go, and it's a little bit like visiting an elephant, a blind man visiting an elephant. If you feel the trunk, you think it's a snake. If you feel the leg, you think it's a tree. So this museum has so many different aspects of it, which you highlighted here, the remarkable variety of the collections and the remarkable number of temporary exhibitions. So,
Right.
and also thank you for drawing our attention to the Musée de Camondo, which is a giant period piece in its own right, 18th century, 19th century, 18th century furniture, I think you said.
Yeah.
So yes, I certainly second your encouragement to visit both the Museum of Decorative Arts and the Camondo Museum. So you at the beginning of your presentation, you said that the UCAD, the Union Centrale des Arts Décoratifs, was created in 1882, and it had a pavilion or a stand in the Universal Exhibition of 1900. What happened in the 18 years between the creation and the Universal Exhibition of 1900?
I think the library was first installed Place des Vosges, and at that time was only the library. And progressively they bought things, but I don't know where they were stored, probably at the place of the donors. And they were waiting for the place to install them as a museum.
I see. Okay. And it really kicked off, I guess, as you pointed out, with the moving into the Pavillon Marsan in 1905. Okay. So, and you also mentioned the lengthy restoration project that took place 100 years later. And you joined during that restoration project.
Yes.
So that must have been an interesting period. What were you and the other 13 curators doing during the restoration works?
We were thinking of the renovation, of the new way to presenting. We were selecting the items which we wanted them to be on show. We organized the conservation of it because some of them were damaged. And every pieces installed, it's about 1.5 million, as I said, total, but installed it's less. Everything has been restored before the installation in 2006. So it was a huge preparation work. Of course, from the outside, you cannot exactly think of what were we doing for 10 years, but I can tell you we were not on holidays.
No, I can imagine. Was the entire building emptied during this?
It was not emptied at the very first moment when it closed in April 1996. Actually, for a little, like I think nearly 3 or 5 or 4 years, for most of it, it was just like Sleeping Beauty castle.
Uh-huh.
Everything was still installed.
Uh-huh.
And then in 2002 was the beginning of the moving out of things and the beginning of the major structural renovation with noise, with scaffoldings and so on and so forth.
And you showed that today there's a huge amount of restoration going on purely on the facade.
Yes, purely on the facade for now. And then we've been asked to think about renovating the journey in the Musée des Arts Décoratifs. So thinking of renovating the way we presented things. But this is very awkward because at that moment, we don't know yet if there is a budget for it. So we have to think of renovating, presenting in another way without knowing if we have a budget. So we try things.
Oh yeah, well, that is definitely a challenge.
It's a challenge. And as for Camondo, it's approximately the same circumstances of Musée des Arts Décoratifs more than 10 years ago. It has to be renovated. As for the electricity, so from September 2024, Camondo will be closed for 1 year. So should you want to visit, you must come before September or from September 25.
Okay, well, I'm glad you pointed that out, and
Yeah.
we will definitely get there first. Also, in your presentation, you mentioned that the Museum of Decorative Arts is a private nonprofit museum with a national collection. So when you say it's with a national collection, does the nonprofit organization own the collection?
No, it's like a rent. I mean, it's a bit complicated, but it's like we are taking care of it.
Okay.
And actually, should we want, of course, to have things unknown or to buy things, we have to refer to the service of the National Collection, which is the organization which is managing the Louvre or the National Collection elsewhere, for instance.
Oh, really?
So it's very odd.
Okay, well, that's very interesting, because in previous presentations, for example, we talked with Séverine Lepape about the Cluny Museum, and now in 1977, that's a national museum, and in 1977, their Renaissance collection was removed,
right,
and transferred to the Château des Couronnes, because the Cluny Museum did not control the collection. It was, I guess, the same National Museum Service that owned it and can reallocate as it wishes. Okay, well, that is indeed very unique. And as you say, you receive support nevertheless from, is it the Ministry of the Culture?
Yes, we did, but not enough. It's partly supportive for the salaries of persons and for some I mean daily basis needs, but it excluded the acquisitions and the restoration, for instance.
Right. So operating expenses primarily.
Yes, and operating, but only partly operating expenses, because even for structural renovation, we have to find sponsors, external sponsor, like private sponsor.
Very good. Well, it's nice to have those portraits of your donors displayed in the stairway.
It's great. Yeah.
Small technical question. One of your slides had a picture of the cabinet d'amateur.
Yes.
Full of 33 clocks, which I've never heard that expression before. Is that a technical term, a cabinet d'amateur?
I would say it's a 19th century term. that refers to a person who's a collector and he's got his own, like a den, you know, a den in your house where you got everything which is your cherished belongings, you know,
Okay,
and it's typical of late 19th century.
okay, like a cabinet of curiosities?
Exactly, sort of, yes.
Okay,
That's something you can compare to, yes.
okay. And now we have just one more question. Everyone wants to know what are in all those boxes behind you, all the colored boxes that are behind you. It looks like the library.
Alors, it's a sort of library that corresponds to, I can show you like that.
Ooh la la.
It's
Color
all,
coordinated, color.
all the way, well, the colors, it's a previous organization. We kept them, but it doesn't refer anymore to something specific. And in these boxes, you would be able to find the files for the collection. For instance, if I take a box like that, it's like unboxing on the Instagram, you know. Here is a file. And inside the file, you have documents. This is the condition report, because this is a piece that has been on loan to an exhibition. This is the invoice because it's been renovated. And here is the rapport de traitement. That's the, how could you translate that?
The conservation?
Sorry?
The preservation work done, perhaps?
Yes, the preservation file, some restorer, some conservator who renovated,
Restored.
worked on it because it was damaged.
I see.
That's a rabbit.
Oh, beautiful.
So that's the files for the works of art. Actually, 17th and 18th century, it's approximately 20,000 works.
Oh, boy. So you have 20,000 boxes like that?
Not exactly, because some objects doesn't have a file yet.
I see. Okay.
Because only 2 people work on the collection. So,
Awesome.
of course, it's not enough.
Right. Okay, well, that thank you so much for that clarification and for your excellent presentation. And I'm afraid we will have to leave it there and mention to our viewers out there that they will be all receiving links to a recording not only of this lecture, but of all the lectures in the series, which alas concludes today. This has been the last in our lecture series on the making of the great museums of Paris. And thanks to our speakers like Sophie, we have learned how 6 of the first museums of Paris were created and how they have evolved over time. Françoise Mardrus told us the story of the Louvre, the neighbor of the slightly larger neighbor of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, surely the greatest art museum in the world. We discovered together the Museum of the History of France at the Château de Versailles, and the Museum of the History of the City of Paris at the Hotel Carnavalet with Ulysse Jardin. We've learned about museums whose origins can be traced to some of France's greatest collectors. We talked about Nissim de Commodo, his phenomenal personal collection. Today, Alexandre de Sommarat, his medieval and Renaissance art objects form the founding collection of the Cluny Museum, as explained by its director, Séverine Lepape, and the extraordinary Duc d'Aumale, who rebuilt the Grand Château de Chantilly to house his vast collection in what became the Musée du Condé, as explained by its director, Mathieu Daldic. And today, Sophie Motsch brought us into the modern age with the story of the Museum of Decorative Arts, which was a product of the Industrial Revolution. and industrial design. So thank you, Sophie, and the Alliance
Thank you.
Française Miami Metro and the Alliance Française de Chicago would also like to thank our partners for their support, and especially the speakers in our series who so generously given of their time to tell us the stories of their museums. And we certainly urge all of you out there, the next time you are in Paris, to visit
Sure.
the 6 museums. And actually, you know, the Commando is the 7th museum that were featured in this series. And so finally, thank you all for attending the Making of the Great Museums of Paris. And we look forward to seeing you next year. Au revoir.
Bye bye. Au revoir de Paris.